Welcome.
I can't say all right because Paul has already picked me up that I say all right at every episode. But hello, everyone. Thanks for joining us. You can see everyone coming in. We have Lauren here already with us, just hanging out. We're just talking about our beautiful plants in the background that we can't take credit for. They're Paul's plants. And also we have a new neon sign that we didn't talk about last time. But
we're move it a bit closer for the viewers at home.
Us. Yeah. If this is the first time joining us on Riverside, there is a little, if you highlight, like put your mouse over each of the screens, you can minimize or maximize your view so you have control over what you can see. And there's also a chat on the right-hand side for everyone to use throughout the session. Ask questions at any time and we'll get to them because the winner will receive, which we were just talking about with Lauren, because Lauren loves jelly beans and socks, which are included in our little branded gift packs.
So the best question will get this one delivered straight to your door. Super comfy socks. Yeah.
All right. Okay. Let's kick things off. I'll just stop sharing my screen and let's get into it. All right. Paul's be happy that I said that. Okay, welcome everyone. Thank you for joining us for another episode of Talking Talent Live. Today we are joined by the lovely Lauren Stanton, EY Talent Acquisition Leader and Executive Coach. Super excited to have her here with us today. And it has also been the biggest uptake in terms of registrants. I think we clocked like 230 this morning. So yeah. Massive episode. So a few things we're going to talk about today just to give everyone on the call a bit of a heads up. So we're going to talk about award-winning talent attraction campaign examples with you, Lauren, as well as, you know, if they're budget-friendly and high impact. The positive outcome of embedding individual purpose and potential, which we know you're really passionate about in your talent team culture. But to start with, we are going to talk about how EY is currently focusing less on, I guess, the polish and the shiny and more on the grit when it comes to activating your employer brand. So starting there, we're just going to launch straight in. We know that you and your team has won a bunch of awards, and you were just saying before we went live that there's been a few more that you've been nominated for, which is just crazy. So first of all, what are you feeding your team at EY? But in all seriousness, I guess there's like a little bit of an assumption that an enterprise organization like EY, who obviously has a very large talent team, must be spending bucket loads of cash on, you know, support and activation when it comes to talent attraction. Is this true or is this a myth?
I'm very sad to say that it's a myth. I think it's a really good question. It's one that we get a lot. And I wish that we had bucket loads of money to spend on things like our creative. But in actual fact, we just do a lot of it ourselves. So we did actually work with an external agency last year. It was around the time that we were coming out of COVID. You know, the team were really resource constrained, and obviously that talent war was really starting to heat up. And so we worked with an agency to help us have an impact in the market when our internal team was under incredible pressure. But with the awards, you know, those campaigns that we have won awards for or have been shortlisted for were largely developed and deployed, you know, in-house. Our employer brand team, there's three of them, three incredible women who make up our employer brand team. And so they work really closely with our talent acquisition team to come up with ideas, you know, pull out stories from across the business, effectively to help bring our EVP to life. We do also have an internal creative services team. They sit under sort of the brand marketing communications banner, and they work really closely with our employer brand team, essentially to make our campaigns a reality. You know, they know our brand better than anyone, better than any agency really. So we often take our crazy ideas to them and they let us know, you know, what's possible within, you know, the guidelines of EY and within the budgets that we're working with.
Yeah, and Lauren, from my experience, I feel like, especially in some of the larger organizations where there's a lot of oversight on these things, it's easier to gravitate towards the really polished stuff where you're getting an agency in to do the whole lot because it's safe, right? It's a safer bet, and therefore it can be a little bit more uncomfortable, or it takes a different level of empowerment or push from, especially from a leadership standpoint, to empower the team to be more gritty and try those things that aren't as safe. So yeah, how have you been kind of working through that empowerment of your team to get to this place where you're actually able to deliver award-winning things that are not coming from a really polished approach?
And I think it's something that we actually grapple with quite a bit. Both within the team and sort of more broadly. As you said, it takes a lot of conversations, probably a lot of trust as well, that, if we want to try something new or we want to do something a little bit different, that, the business trusts us that it's not going to be a big flop or it's going to resonate with the market. I think, to the point that you were making before, there is almost an expectation that an organization like ours has a certain amount of polish, a certain amount of, perfection or pizzazz, but that's actually not what resonates with people at an individual level. So what we deliver to our clients, for example, is very different to what we need to deliver to our candidates. And I know you've used the word grit. It was something that we spoke about, a bit as we were preparing for this session. And when I think about grit or grittiness, it's really authenticity. So it's real stories from real people, and everyone playing a part in communicating our brand to the market. Not just the brand team. We absolutely subscribe to this idea that people connect with or resonate with other people, not just a brand. And so it's one thing for us to say as EY, we have a great culture, come and join us, or we offer incredible flexibility, come and build your career here. But it's actually far more meaningful when you hear a story or read a story from someone who works here, about the impact that that culture has had on them, or the impact that a particular leader has had on them, or what our flexibility policy, as great as it is, might have actually enabled them to do outside of work. And if I think about a specific example of that is something like our EY Unplugged days. If you go and search for the hashtag on LinkedIn, hashtag EY Unplugged, you'll see lots of great stories and imagery of how people have chosen to spend their EY Unplugged days. That's not us asking people to share or encouraging them to share. It's certainly not filtered or curated by us, but that's the most impactful way to get our brand out in the market is really through our people.
Yeah, and it's leaning into that, like you were saying, the honest storytelling is what candidates really are looking for, whether they're applying, to a small business like ours or at a big organization like EY. They want to hear from your people. They want to hear authentic, real stories. So it was really refreshing and nice to hear you say that you're really leaning into that as a team. So I'm going to pipe in with another little misconception that I think people may think that you need a big team and a big budget in order to achieve, employer brand consistency and success ultimately, to really stand out in the market, especially these days. But when we were preparing for this episode, again, you were talking about an award-winning campaign recently that you spent 10,000 Australian dollars on. So really keen to understand what that process looked like right from the beginning, ideation and setup and planning through to implementation and, any results that you've seen.
And look, don't get me wrong. If we had $100,000 to spend on it, I would have spent $100,000 on it. And I'm sure our employer brand team are potentially listening to this going, gosh, I wish we had more than 10,000. But so that one was our Coming Home campaign. It is something that we had actually deployed a couple of years ago, kind of pre-COVID, and we took it off the shelf and dusted it off and kind of revitalized it post-COVID, as borders were sort of starting to open up here. And I think, it was certainly much more successful this time. Even looking at, microsite visits alone, for example, it was actually 3 times more successful than when we deployed it pre-COVID. And I think the key difference was the emotional connection, to the content and to what we were sharing, because we really wanted to connect with people who, had been separated from home and from their families for the last couple of years, hadn't been able to travel to see family due to COVID, and effectively provide them the opportunity to return home to Australia and New Zealand, and just as a bonus, kind of build their career with EY as well. So We, took imagery from around Australia and New Zealand that was really reflective of kind of the landscape here, and I mean that literally, not just figuratively, and took stories from people who had been offered roles with EY to help them, return home to our region, and essentially just shared that both internally and externally. It was both organic and paid, and that $10,000 that we spent was largely spent on actually creating the content, not so much, marketing it out, I guess, across the web. And it was really interesting to see how much it resonated with people internally. And that was actually where we saw the most, the greatest impact, because, people were picking it up internally and obviously feeling passionate about it, and sharing it with their networks. And so we had incredible referrals come through. We had incredible reach from the campaign. It was largely because of, our people, I guess, sharing it, connecting with it and sharing it.
I think that's always a good sign when there's more employees getting behind it by choice. Do you know what I mean? It's not because somebody's gone out and tapped every single person on the shoulder and said you need to do this, because to me it kind of speaks to, okay, you must have got something right in the messaging there. You must have got the authenticity there. You must have believed the message was a true reflection of their kind of thoughts and feelings on the topic as well. We just had a question come through from David as well. So with that direct employees directly posting that on LinkedIn, so was all of that content kind of pre-prepared stuff that you made available to them, or were they able to create their own things and share it? And if so, was there how do you deal with those scenarios where the content might not be quite right, and you might have to have a conversation around it not being on social media or being taken down? Is that something that's come up?
Oh, that's such a good question. Because I actually believe that the more impactful content is what people create themselves. So to answer the first part of the question, yes, we had, beautiful imagery, EY branded content that we shared, each week with the business over a period of a number of weeks, with, some suggested captions, that kind of thing, in case people weren't feeling particularly creative. It was about this time last year. I don't know how many people are feeling particularly creative going into the holiday period. But it's so much more impactful when people actually disregard that and create their own message, I think. Look, there are always going to be times when people share a message that is perhaps not on brand, or, perhaps not what our employer brand team would draft or what I would draft, for example. But I think there has to be a certain amount of trust in, people to do the right thing, and I guess a certain amount of encouragement and empowerment that they're so passionate about the work that they do that they want others to come and work here too. So I don't know if that helps to answer the question, but I think it's probably letting go of some of that control, and trusting that the message is impactful with their network.
Yeah, totally. And I suppose with all this talk around kind of content and campaign creation, one of the topics we've heard in the past, I'm curious how this works within your team, because you kind of got a large group, some specialized roles, and then the broader talent acquisition piece as well, around skill development. So what does that mix of your team look like? People who came in with previous experience and or skills within content, whether it be creating their own content for their individual profiles or company or brand content, versus those that might come in with a stronger talent acquisition or recruitment background and are going to pick up those skills now that that's part of the focus. So what does that mix kind of look like, and how are you thinking about building up that skills and capability more holistically across the function?
And I think this is such a great reflection of just how talent acquisition specialist roles have evolved over the last, probably 5 years, right? Is that, they're not just a recruiter in the true sense of the word at the moment. They are content creators and brand managers and relationship managers. And, that's not why we naturally hire people into those roles, but I think it certainly has evolved into that. Um, it seems counterintuitive, but I actually think that the most kind of critical part of storytelling is actually listening. So listening to someone share their story, listening for what is said, what is not said, pulling out themes, kind of guiding them to tell a really engaging story. And obviously our employer brand team are really good at this already. That's why they were hired into the roles that they were. But they're 3 people at the end of the day. And, so we absolutely need to rely on everybody in our talent attraction and acquisition team to be able to pull out really engaging stories. So in TA, we are very much focused on honing this skill. We have kind of 3 guiding principles that, if I had a pretty slide here for you, basically we represent them as like cogs in an engine. They are essentially the guiding principles that help us to be at our best, as individuals and as a team. And so they are driving connectedness and trust for us as a team, helping our team learn and grow, looking ahead to the future of talent acquisition, and communicating a compelling story for our candidates and stakeholders. And when I say that, it's not just thinking about big campaigns, but it's through every candidate conversation that we have, every interaction that we have. So really trying to build this muscle both as a team and as individuals, asking different questions, whether it's in a job brief or a focus group. We've recently implemented inclusion nudges, to help spark some different conversations as well. So listening, curiosity, 2 major components of how we're trying to hone that. I have an example for you if you would like it.
Please.
So if anybody Googles EY, you'll see that our corporate purpose is building a better working world. And we consistently get feedback that it's a beautiful purpose, but what does it actually mean? And what does it mean to someone who is, in a role in a big organization? And so, when we think about this, this concept, I'm always keen for the team to really draw this out, in terms of what it actually means, for a particular role that they might be working on. And rather than asking a hiring manager, how are you building a better working world, they ask different questions to help draw it out. So if I was working on a role, I might ask the hiring manager, for the project that you're working on currently, what is the end impact to a customer of that client? Or, how do you track down hackers and ensure that customer data isn't at risk? Very topical at the moment. I got another email about that today. In assurance, how does the work that you're doing impact climate change, for example? And then taking what we get from those hiring managers and sharing that with candidates, I think is much more tangible and impactful than saying, how are you building a better working world?
That's so good too, that you're actually listening to the feedback from candidates who are saying, what does that, essentially EVP tagline mean to me if I'm applying for this role, and that you are making it contextual to each position that you're advertising and an opportunity that's out in the market. So I think that's probably a nice little segue into the next topic of the day. Please feel free to continue asking questions in the chat, and thank you, David, for the one before. But talking, I guess, a little bit more about individuals finding purpose. So like you were saying, the purpose of that specific role and how it connects to the overall tagline or EVP of the business. So we know that you, Lauren, are really passionate about helping your team and individuals find purpose in their day-to-day. So really curious to understand where that came from. Where did it all start for you?
So I'm relatively new to this concept, but I'm a pretty quick convert, I think. And I'm sure that if my team are listening in today, they're probably almost sick of me talking about this concept of purpose. In our last team social, we actually went through another purpose discovery exercise. So yes, it is absolutely something that I'm super passionate about. So I've been with EY for many years now, and have had a couple of different roles in talent. And I actually spent a couple of years in talent development, or L&D. And it was actually coincidentally around the time that the business was really exploring this concept of personal purpose. So we've had our corporate purpose of building a better working world has really been embedded for a number of years, but we were playing with this concept of personal purpose. And so I was actually lucky enough to be mentored by a partner here who was working with external clients on this as well, both organizational and personal purpose. And I learnt so much from her. And also became really fascinated by the research around the benefits of purpose. And I wrote a couple of these down because I didn't want to forget them, because I think they're pretty important. So people who lead with purpose are found to be more resilient to stress, less prone to disease like Alzheimer's, have greater overall productivity and well-being, experience greater fulfillment, and apparently even increased financial success. I'm yet to test that one, but that's what the research tells us. And so I thought, what a powerful thing to lead with purpose. I actually do have a purpose statement that I have on a sticky note. I keep it by my laptop all the time. My purpose is to help others rise so that together we can achieve more. And, that helps me get out of bed every day. It is how I show up every day with intention, and how I make difficult decisions too. Everything from which meetings I say yes to, through to what we invest in as a function, where we spend our time as a team. And so it helps me to make purpose-led, values-led decisions. And I just have to say, it wouldn't be a conversation with me if I didn't have a book recommendation for you. So I actually have 3, if anybody is interested in exploring kind of the concept of purpose further, some light holiday reading for you perhaps. So Daniel Pink wrote a great book called Drive, essentially around the intersection between autonomy, mastery, and purpose. Hector Garcia wrote a beautiful book called Ikigai, which is sort of the Japanese concept of purpose. And of course, Simon Sinek, who I love because he's an eternal optimist like me, Start With Why. And his TED Talk is a good place to start if you're not an avid book reader like me.
The 3 of those books are color coded on the back shelf beautifully, I'm sure.
I'm just checking. Paul's got all those books. He's going to drop them in the chat for us. Beautiful. I was just as you were talking, for Lauren, there was two things I wanted to mention. One was obviously we got connected to you through one of your team members, and it was really interesting because when we first spoke to her, she was talking just very naturally a lot about some of her individual purpose and the area that she's focusing on. And it came through strongly. And then by the time we had the conversation with you, and then you started talking about this philosophy that you're instilling into your team from a leadership standpoint, I kind of connected the dots, and I'm like, I saw the practical side of it and the outcome of it come through really powerfully from one of your team members, and then to hear that was your side, it was super interesting. And I think the thing that really stands out to me about it is it's one of the first times, and maybe I'm a bit behind the 8 ball, but it's one of the first times I've heard this concept of like really shifting towards that each individual can have their own purpose and values that's driving them and motivating them, rather than having to be, okay, here's the corporate version and you need to get behind these, and that's what you have to try to connect the dots for yourself of what does that mean to me individually, and try to embrace that yourself. It's really powerful. And I think just flowing on from that, so what's the one so with this kind of point of view that you're bringing into your leadership style, I imagine, what's the practical side of how that plays out week to week, month to month? Is it part of development planning? Is it more of like a group exercise where people workshop that and then share that with the broader group within TA? How do you actually make it happen?
I think it's all of the above, to be honest. I think it is, as new people come into the team, we start to, I don't want to use the word indoctrinate, but we almost indoctrinate them in terms of how important like purpose is, but really how to find meaning in the work that we do. Because I think, to your point, it's so easy to say, well, here's our corporate purpose, just follow that. But at the end of the day, that's not what drives me. That's not kind of the aspirational light on the hill that I'm working toward, right? So I think obviously it's important to be clear on, in our example, how we're building a better working world. But at a more granular level, it's really important that every single person in my team understands what their purpose is and why they do what they do and why they show up the way that they show up. Similar to what I outlined before, helps them get out of bed, helps them be happier and more engaged at work, and helps them get clarity on what they stand for as well and what things are going to be meaningful to them. So it is absolutely, part of their onboarding. They start to understand this concept of purpose at an organizational level. And then, at a team level, we encourage people to, attend our internal workshops around purpose discovery. Before we came to this call, I was sharing with you both sort of the team socials that we run. Usually we do fun things like paint by numbers or trivia. And the last one that we ran, I kind of snuck a purpose discovery session on them unwittingly. And I think that they enjoyed it. Perhaps they're going to drop some stuff in the chat now to share that they didn't. But I think, building this common language and getting comfortable with this concept of purpose, which I think in the past has probably felt quite fluffy. And in my mind, it's certainly not a fluffy concept. Sorry.
And I think purpose discovery should be part of every onboarding in every company. I don't know why that just is not best practice, because we talk all the time about personalization for candidates, and like, why should that personalization stop at the like in the hiring process? That should continue on as you onboard throughout your career and into your new position.
Yeah.
So
and I think in the context of TA, for example, I really want the team to also realize the magnitude of what we do. Every day they are actually helping candidates to make one of the most momentous decisions of their lives. It's right up there with getting married or buying a house, is changing a job. And when you do it day in, day out, it can actually be really easy to lose sight of the fact that, we are guiding people through this really significant life event. And whether that aligns with their purpose or not, at a really granular level, there is something pretty meaningful about that.
Absolutely, that's huge. Sorry, were you going to say
I was going to say, I think also from like a more so employee experience and retention perspective, you're setting a pretty high benchmark for other organizations to compete with. If you're having conversations around individual purpose and supporting that, it sets a very, very high benchmark for competition
from the get-go. Yeah. So before, Lauren, you gave us your purpose on the little sticky note next to your laptop, which I think was help others rise so together we can achieve more.
Yes, that's right.
Is that right? Yes. Gold star. Could you give us maybe some more examples of other purposes, potentials, whatever we call these, in the purpose discovery that has come out from the team that's really guiding them and lighting them up every day?
So it's really interesting when we have this conversation as a team, because there are definitely common themes around helping people. But I think that's probably why we became TA specialists, right? We're in the game of helping people. And it was really interesting listening to Eden in your last podcast talk about how he got into this world of TA. And I suspect most people in our team are the same, in that most of us fall into recruitment or fall into TA. And so there's definite themes around, helping people. We are also starting to see, more people get even clearer on that in terms of having a broader impact on our community and our society, in terms of more inclusive, hiring efforts, and helping candidates from underprivileged or underrecognized backgrounds, into organizations like ours. And so it's just interesting to see that evolving, as people start to get a little bit more clarity on their purpose. But for our team, definitely some key themes around helping others. And for anybody wanting to kind of explore this concept of personal purpose, as you are playing with a purpose statement, because I'm a big fan of putting language around it, to help you become comfortable with the concept. It's essentially the contribution that you make and the impact that you want to have. And that's sort of the two components to a purpose statement.
Beautiful. We actually have a couple of questions in the chat that I might...
Yeah, go for it.
Yeah.
Yep.
We'll just get to before we run out of time. So we have a question here, Lauren, from Julian. It's kind of fell out of topic one, I think, when we're talking about more, employee content generation. So he's asked, how do you encourage your team to show up on video, given that most people shy away from cameras?
Oh, that is a great question. We have a really kind of geographically dispersed team. It's actually why I'm at home, because if I go into the office, which I am trying to do a lot more, it's great that I get to connect with our Brisbane-based team. But I'm generally on calls most of the day with people in other locations. So we have people in every capital city in Australia except Hobart. Sorry, Hobart. We have people in Auckland and Wellington. We have people across the Philippines who are all part of our team. And I think, particularly over the last couple of years, we've just gotten really used to being on video. So I think two things. It's probably just normalizing it. I take lots of cues from facial expressions. I'm a very expressive person myself. Really, those listening to the podcast are missing out today. All my hand gestures. And so I think it's normalizing it, making people feel really comfortable. And I think the second thing is recognizing that some people are actually just uncomfortable being on video, and that has to be okay too. It can also be quite exhausting to be on video all the time. So it's probably about balancing those two factors.
And just off the back of that, just in case, so I think, what does that look like from the collecting? So you were speaking earlier, Lauren, about collecting those stories from within the organisation as well. What's your kind of take on that side of the coin as well, where people either need to be recorded or interviewed or something like that? What have you seen in your space work well, whether it be those, especially around the hiring manager? We've heard secondhand that they're notoriously kind of hard to get them to commit to participating in the content.
Yes,
So
and
what's your take on that?
we have in the past certainly had hundreds of people say absolutely, really happy to be involved in a campaign. The second you mention video, or the second you mention that you need a photo from them, suddenly they go quiet and disappear. So I think the key is being really upfront early on as you are going out to gather stories, that almost the expectation is that we're going to need to see their face at some point. Um, some people are much more comfortable sharing, videos or photos where it's not just them, so encouraging them to do it as a team, encouraging them to bring some of their personal life into it and share, photos or videos from their family, for example. But I think being upfront about it is absolutely critical, because we've definitely seen a drop off in interest the second that you mention video and photo.
Yeah, and sometimes I find it's also giving them options in terms of formats. So like
Absolutely.
You were saying, not just video, maybe photo, or even if not just photo, maybe it's just a testimonial. Maybe it's an inclusion in a blog post. So I think that's,
And I'm probably giving some secrets away here, but we've actually had some success with some of our recent campaigns with audio over video, so a static image with audio over the top of it. I don't know why, but it seems to help people to feel a little bit more comfortable with what they're sharing.
Yeah, that's a great tip. Audio tip. We have another question in the chat, another great one from Gavin. So he's keen to know about how purpose helps to amplify your employer brand across individual teams and how you capture that and bring it to life.
Another good question. I think it probably comes back to some of those examples I gave before around the questions that we ask. I think that if you go and talk to a team in our audit practice, for example, I'm sure some days it probably feels like, well, I don't know how I'm building a better working world, or I don't know how the work that I'm doing aligns with my purpose. But the second that you start to get a little bit more curious and kind of dig a little bit deeper in terms of the work that they're doing and the impact on kind of the end user or the customer, or the community generally, actually it can be quite impactful. And so I remember when I first joined EY, I actually asked the question, but how are we building a better working world in audit, for example? And one of the partners shared a story of someone actually going out onto a client site, and they were auditing the work that a construction company was doing. And they said, well, to you, it might actually just look like numbers on a page, but actually by us going through this process, we're ensuring that all of those people go home safe to their families every night. And we're reducing, deaths on site and that kind of thing. And so at a really high level, it can feel quite disconnected. But the second that you start to ask some more questions and start to pull back a little bit, those layers of what the end impact is, I think that's probably how we start to bring that to life a little bit more.
Coming back to listening, like you were saying before, is the best
Absolutely.
storytelling.
Do you want me to give this one a shot?
Yeah, you go.
Okay. So I'm just going to read it out and then see if we can kind of sum it up. So this is a question that comes from the chat. Post-COVID, all organizations have been working on their EVP and how LinkedIn plays an important part in the EVP building. The content or news shared is more widespread. How do you combat with the negative content or news combined with the previous reputation of the culture of the Big Four? If you could share some strategies to overcome this challenge. So I think it sounds like it's along the lines around kind of Big Four consulting organizations, and how do you, I suppose, perceptions around what it's like to work at those organizations, or the I suppose the broader purpose and values that you were talking about before, versus what you're bringing to light with from an EVP or an employer branding standpoint.
And I think that perception is actually something that's quite difficult to control, right? Because it is the stories that others tell themselves, or the other stories that people hear, and they form an opinion. And so to a certain extent, I actually think it's being okay with that. It's outside of our control. It's not necessarily something that we can change. So focusing on the things that we can control and the things that we can influence and change is probably the only way that we can combat that, because otherwise it almost feels like a hill too high to climb. But I think that, just enabling our people to share their stories, and enabling our people to give insight into the culture, and not just through campaigns and the content that we share on LinkedIn, for example, but through every part of our recruitment process. The stories that we share on our website, the stories that our interviewers share throughout the interview process, what our campus recruiters share when they go out, to universities or to events. I think it is just sharing more stories and letting people make up, their minds for themselves. I joined EY about almost 9 years ago, and came here because I thought a Big Four would look really good on my CV, and it does. But I've just been so impressed with the culture and the opportunities at this organization, and my perception was proven wrong, but in the best possible way.
Awesome. Well, there's questions flying in through this chat.
Yeah, we might as well keep going. We've got time. We can go through. There's a couple more to go through as well. Yeah.
Okay, let's hit the next one. So
you do this one, I'll do the next one.
Okay, cool. So next question, Lauren, is how do we cater to counter offer problems? Candidates, coming up with multiple offers, higher compensation by other companies as an example, or overseas opportunities. How do we keep the talent attracted and motivated to join?
So I think there's a big difference between competing offers and counter offers. I'm never a big fan of trying to compete with a counter offer. And when I say counter offer, I mean from their current organization, because 9 times out of 10, if someone is even considering a counter offer, then perhaps they probably weren't serious about joining your organization, or perhaps the time is just not right for them, right, to make a move. So if it's a counter offer with their current organization, I'd almost back away and go, okay, call us in 3 months when you're ready to make a move. We have seen, I think, probably the most competitive market over the last sort of 12 to 18 months for competing offers. People coming to us going, oh, I've got 4 different offers. What are you going to do? And even in our campus team, this has been really prevalent. We've seen students be offered, multiple roles, I guess, with multiple organizations, like nothing I've ever seen before. And I think this is where the relationships that our TA people, build with candidates throughout the process is absolutely critical. Because yes, someone is weighing up the brand. Yes, someone is weighing up the work that they're going to be doing. And of course, they're weighing up the salary. But at the end of the day, people want to work with people that they like and they respect and they resonate with, and connect with. So I think the relationships that you build throughout the recruitment process are going to be probably the number one thing that differentiate you.
And Lauren, within that setting, have you? This might be a tricky question, but have you seen that play out, like in terms of at a quantitative level, like where there's any insight at all into, okay, well, a candidate did have a better offer in terms of pay, but they still chose to go with something that might be slightly less there, but was a better fit. Like, how does that look? Have you got any insight on that and how that's playing out?
Yeah, absolutely. Look, I think it is probably anecdotal, but we have absolutely seen, even just EY, right? We've seen people join EY over the last sort of 6 to 12 months, even if on paper they have a better offer elsewhere. For those of you listening, I just did air quotation marks, one of my other favorite things to do with my hands. So I think that people, yes, while money is important, particularly at the moment, it is still not the number one reason why people move. It's certainly not the number one reason why people accept offers with EY, and the data does show us that at a grand scale, which is great. For us, it's more around learning and development opportunities and the people they're going to be working with.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, so important to have them exposed to multiple people in that hiring process, right? Like I'm sure some candidates, when
Absolutely.
they're like, hang on a minute, I've got 4 calls scheduled. Like what? But meeting 4 different people in the organization probably gives them more of a connection to EY, and more likely to, like you said, want to work for the people that you meet.
Absolutely.
Cool. All right. Looks like we've got one more left. So this one's from Nick, and this is about hybrid working and talking about how individuals. I suppose what Nick is saying here is like individuals, if they're in a hybrid work setting, they can't really have those hallway conversations. They can't go tap somebody on the shoulder and say, they have to be more self-determined to make choices for themselves and have some increased independence. Is what Nick's putting forward there. So. Leaders should or must support them in creating the conditions for that, still having that collaboration and efficient use of resources and tools. I think for you, Lauren, from a leadership standpoint, how do you encourage people to have that higher level of personal responsibility or coaching and use of tools to set people up for success when they are a little bit more isolated because of this increasing amount of work from home situation?
Look, I think it's partly about balance. We're certainly, now that we can go into the office, we're certainly encouraging people to connect, in their locations, whether it's with people from their immediate team or not. But I think it's also about giving ourselves permission and giving the team permission to build that water cooler chat into our day to day. So you might have a 25-minute meeting, ensuring that you check in with each other at the start of that meeting, and maybe waste, oh God, quotation marks again, waste that first 10 minutes just checking in with each other around how was your weekend, and what it is that you're working on and what are you working towards, and then get down into the purpose of the meeting. So I think that's really important too. For our team, we have things like obviously a wonderful Teams channel, and people are always asking questions and engaging with each other. I mentioned our all hands calls and our team socials, again, really building in almost structure around how we enable people to connect. And then we have a daily Ask Anything call that our ops team host. And part of that is about asking for help for problems that we kind of come across. But part of it too is just an opportunity to drop in and chat with other people in the team. So I think being okay with carving out time to just chat, I think, is important.
Yeah, we kind of do that. Like we're 80% working from home, and obviously we're a very small team. We still, so it makes it a bit easier. But yeah, kind of Monday mornings we keep it formal, but then we just leave that space for chatting, and usually some good things come out of that. Just to keep everybody connected.
Yeah, absolutely. I am also hearing, again, anecdotally, that people are far less productive in the office at the moment because they haven't seen people for so long, and they spend so much more time just chatting and doing the water cooler thing and spending time in the kitchen. And, we have to be okay with that as well.
Yeah, unless
we've been deprived of so much personal connection over the last couple of years that I think we have to be okay with that in this moment.
True. Unless there's like a scheduled workshop or something that, you're going in for dedicated team ideation, then it's very hard to get stuff done in the office. I 100% agree. But it's nice to connect. We actually have 2 more questions that I really want to ask because
these are too good.
They're really good.
Skip. Yeah.
So we're just going to keep going. So you're still with us? Thank you. And Lauren, are you okay just to keep going for a little bit more?
Absolutely.
Okay, cool. So we have a question from Lara. She has asked, what additional development tools do you provide to hiring managers regarding the recruitment process to remain competitive and to ensure they are building that personal relationship with the candidate?
I actually love this question because at the moment at EY, it's Neurodiversity November, which is actually led by our DE&I team. But one of the most cool things and most impactful things that they're offering at the moment are joint initiatives between TA and DE&I, and they're effectively workshops to help interviewers and hiring managers and managers generally to work more effectively with and support people who are neurodiverse or neurodivergent. And we actually have a development plan, like a 12-month development plan for our interviewers and hiring managers, which is essentially a capability uplift plan around things like unconscious bias, interviewing, asking great questions, accessibility requirements, and how to manage that as that comes up throughout the process. So some of those we do ourselves, others we get experts in externally. We have some great industry partners that we collaborate with to offer things like that to our hiring managers and interviewers.
Great learning and development.
Okay.
Next one.
And the other one is from Bree. So Bree is looking for some insights from a practical standpoint around. I think this is in relation to some of the culture or the approach you were mentioning earlier, Lauren, around employee advocacy and opening that up and leveraging your employees to act as advocates in the market. So, what's some of the practical side of that you're able to share for Bree?
So in the past, we had a formal talent ambassador program. We made sure that they had all access to our kind of social sharing tool. We ran sessions for them, kind of gave them content regularly, and it was fine. But we've actually, it kind of evaporated kind of going into COVID. And since then, we've actually just worked to broaden our pool of people who we collaborate with and engage with in the business more broadly. And so they don't wear a formal talent ambassador hat, but they are people who are just passionate about, kind of sharing stories about our culture and EY Unplugged Days and Neurodiversity November. We have some great networks at EY, and I know lots of organisations do. Our Unity Network, Gender Network, Ability, who all have really engaged groups of people who are passionate about a particular topic. And so anytime we are running a campaign or perhaps need some more vocal kind of people in our corner, then we will typically go to our networks and say, hey, can you help us to get the message out? And for us, it's absolutely a balance of, not just going to our leaders, but going to our more junior people in the business who often have even richer networks than our leaders do.
Totally. Cool.
Great. All right. Well, we might just move into the last little segment of the day, which, Lauren, I know you already mentioned Eden's episode. So assuming you might already know this question, but Eden Haddock is the founder of Createfulness and TA Consultant, and he is really passionate about helping teams kind of shift out of that reactive mindset and really tap into their creativity. So I'm going to just play this slide. Fingers crossed it works. Yay. And then Eden will ask you a question.
I would love... I want to hear, I've talked through Createfulness today, and something that I'm really proud of that I've come up with. to help teams, disconnect from that reactive mindset to their creative mindset. I want to hear something that your team has done or something that you could come up with on the spot that would help your team do that. So not floristry, something else. What's something creative you could do to bring your team on that journey to get them into that creative mind? I'd love to hear an idea. I want to see more and more of these kind of initiatives rolling out.
So I clearly cheated, and I'm not doing this on the spot because I did listen to his podcast. And in my view, the best way to really cultivate a culture of creativity and innovation is to, invite in diverse perspectives. So I really cheated, and I put this question to my team so that they could all have input into this. And there were some key themes that came through, so I thought I would share them. So they felt there were a few things that we really needed to enable creativity, autonomy and empowerment. I think something we've talked about a lot on this call today, aspiration and vision, curiosity and growth mindset, safety to try new things, space to think and create, and Lego. Lots and lots of Lego.
Lego. Yeah, we talk about safety all the time, don't we, at work? Yeah. Feeling that you feel safe to express ideas and try new things and be creative. So I think that's a great tip. Thank you to the whole EY team for contributing. But now it's over to you, Lauren. You get to ask a question for our next guest, who is actually Helen from Microsoft. So
awesome.
What would you like to ask Helen?
So my question for Helen is, coming into 2023, it's likely we're going to be faced with a changed talent market again, and this pace of change is rapidly increasing. Our TA teams need to keep shifting to grow and meet the market. So my question is, how do you build trust and credibility in your TA function to help them shift from order takers to trusted advisors?
Beautiful question.
Nice.
We'll put that to Helen. All right. Well,
I can't take credit for that one. I outsourced that one to the team too. They did an exceptional job.
Love the honesty. Well, that brings us to the end of this session. I'll just pop up our final little slide for everyone. So thank you so much, Lauren, for sharing everything that you did today. I thought it was such a valuable session, and lots of tips to take away and try on. If anyone has any feedback or other topics or guests to suggest, we have one more episode coming up, like I just mentioned, with Helen from Microsoft next month. So that'll be out soon for everyone to jump on board with. But yeah, just want to thank you very much again, Lauren, for joining us. Paul will pop Lauren's LinkedIn in the chat too, if anyone would like to connect who's not currently connected. And I think that's kind of it.
Yeah, I think, Lauren, you've definitely struck a chord here. Looking at these questions, these in-depth questions, that's the most we've ever had. So seems like your presence here has been really valuable for everybody that's joined today. So thank you. It's been great.
Thank you for having me. And if anybody has questions that they haven't been able to ask today, I'm really happy for them to connect with me on LinkedIn. And clearly I'm passionate about this, so happy to continue the conversation.
Cool. Thanks everybody for joining.
Thanks, guys. Bye.
Bye.